Welcome again to Somewhere Through Time. This channel is dedicated to people who experience past life memories, those who simply cannot forget. Here, you can share your stories without judgment while remaining anonymous. Shall we begin? We'll grab your tea or coffee or hot cocoa, and let's begin. Today's case comes from Trutz Hardo, the most well-known expert on reincarnation and regression therapy in Germany. He holds seminars in Europe, Australia, and the USA, and has appeared on several television programs. I wish to draw your attention to a case in which an unborn soul announces its wish to be reborn to a particular woman, telling her that she would recognize him by his scars. Professor Stevenson examined this case, which took place in southeastern Alaska. The case of Indian boy Corliss is one of my favorites to discuss during my lectures on reincarnation, since it has many interesting aspects to it. This boy belonged to a tribe of Tlingit Indians, of whom approximately 7,000 still live in their original region of southeastern Alaska. The belief in reincarnation is widely accepted in that region, as is the case among many Indians and Eskimo tribes, belief having become knowing. Victor Vincent was a Tlingit fisherman. During the years before his death, he visited his niece Corliss more and more frequently. She was the daughter of his sister, Gertrude. He seemed to be very fond of his niece, and especially their youngest daughter, whom he believed to be the reincarnation of his sister Gertrude. In other words, the daughter was her own grandmother, who had been Victor Vincent's sister. About a year before his death, Victor told his niece the following: "I will return as your next son. I hope I won't be stuttering as much then as I do now. Your son will bear these scars." He lifted a shirt to reveal a scar on his back, which had remained visible years after having had an operation. There were also needle marks clearly visible around this scar. Then Victor pointed to another scar from an operation, which he had on his nose. He said that this too would identify him in his next life as her son. He also told his niece why he wants to be reborn to her. "I know that with you, I will be well looked after. You won't go off getting drunk." Sadly, there were many alcoholics among his relations, for alcohol had become a curse among his people. In many ways, modern living had separated them from their traditions, or brought them into conflict with them. On my travels around the world, I've experienced many such examples of devastation, where modern influences have had disastrous effects on indigenous people. 18 months after Victor's death, his niece gave birth to a boy, who was given his father's name, Corliss Jr. His parents were convinced that their son was Uncle Victor reborn, since he was born with exactly those scars he had shown them before his death, namely on his nose and back. When he was 13 months old, his mother tried to help him pronounce his name Corliss. The boy suddenly pointed to himself, saying, "Mikakudi." This had been the name of Vincent's tribe. Since he corrected everyone who called him Corliss with the name Kakudi, this name finally stuck. When an aunt visited his mother and was told about Corliss being Vincent reborn, the woman said, "I knew it." After his death, Victor appeared to me in a dream and said that he was now incarnating in your body so that he could be your son. The mother had waited in vain for such a dream, since it was very common among them for the soul seeking to reincarnate to announce their arrival in a dream. When Corliss was 2 years old, he traveled to the neighboring seaside town with his mother. Unexpectedly, they met a young woman, and before any words were exchanged, the little boy called out her name. He was so happy he jumped with joy, calling her by her Tlingit name, for this woman had been his stepdaughter in a previous life. A little later, the boy caught sight of a man among the pedestrians, pointed at him, and said to his mother, "There's my son, William." A year later, Corliss's mother took him along to a Tlingit gathering. Among the many people present, he saw an elderly woman and said, "That's the old dame. That's my Rose." This woman had been his previous wife, whom he used to call Old Dame when he was Victor. In the years that followed, Corliss recognized several of Victor's relatives and friends, calling them not only by their Christian names, but also by the name of the tribe they belonged to. He also had a stutter like him, just as he had mentioned to his niece in his previous life. When he was 10 years old, he started having speech therapy. This seemed to have cured him, because when Stevenson spoke with him, he no longer stuttered. Victor had been a very religious man, which was why he joined the Salvation Army. Corliss also developed similar views on life. which became noticeable when he avidly started reading the Bible and later decided to look for a Bible school. Victor had been a keen fisherman. He used to say that he would be happy to spend all his life out at sea. He had also been very good at fixing boat engines and anything involving the use of his hands. He could not have inherited this from his father, since he apparently had no such skills. Corliss was also left-handed, just like Victor had been. It is important to note that Stevenson always inspected extremely carefully the birthmarks that babies were born with. The mark on the base of Corliss's nose was from a small operation that Victor had undergone in the hospital in 1938. This mark was still visible after the operation, during which they had removed the right tear duct. But the larger mark on the back was not typical of a usual birthmark. It was about 2.5 centimeters long, dark in color, slightly raised, and about 0.5 centimeters wide. Stevenson writes, "Along the edges of the main scar, I could see the small round marks on both sides. 4 of these were in a straight line, like needle wounds received during surgery. Corliss must have scratched the scar, for it was often inflamed." Stevenson had the hospital send them a detailed account of Victor Vincent's operation. Corliss's scar on his back perfectly matched the one Victor had been left with after his surgical operation. Chelsea Shakespeare once said, "I don't think that science and the paranormal have to be at war. In fact, it's crucial that they work together. It seems naive to believe that the world is exactly as it seems."